Wizard Trials, written by J.T. Williams. For more, check out more of the YouTube channel and follow the author on Patreon for the most exclusive content, linked in the description. Copyright 2018, J.T. Williams, creator of the Dwemhar Realms. Chapter 1. A Shadow Elf's Solitude. He had very few words with those around him. As it was, he had avoided any form of small talk beyond mere gestures for a few weeks, and for a shadow elf wishing to be left alone, this was perfect. He had finally reached the loneliness of the Glacial Seas, and finding a warm tavern on a small island of fishers was exactly what he wanted, second only to a fine alcoholic beverage. The tavern itself was decorated with the heads of strange sea creatures. Several different spears of varying size were mounted above a large fire across the room. There were a lot of fishers here, from what he could tell. The barkeep said little to him beyond gesturing to the ale behind him, for which drink Evurn wanted, and then the man turned his attention back to a whaling party that came in and demanded a room for the night. Evurn was content to just enjoy his beverage, but that was about to be interrupted.
A wizard in these parts? That's a bit strange, I'd say.
He said nothing to the strange man. He didn't care for probing questions, and considering his less-than-perfect past and the rather larger sum of gold out on his own head, he expected at least one headhunter to be following him. When this strange figure first walked into the tavern, he really didn't know what to make of the tall man in black robes, peering around the tavern as if searching for a long-lost friend. He really didn't want him to sit down next to him, but just as he thought that, the man did exactly that. A few moments later, he ordered tea, which only seemed to perturb the shadow elf more. No one ordered tea at a tavern.
You look like the type who would like to go on a little adventure.
Really?
Evurn replied. The man smiled and laughed, offering his hand and some weird gesture of touching that Evurn did not understand.
The name is Lorlaam.
The man kept his hand out for some odd reason, and Evurn was not sure exactly what the man expected him to do. After a few moments, he retracted his hand and just stared at Evurn.
Yes, you indeed do look like the type who enjoys an adventure.
Though Evurn had remained silent to this man, Lorlaam was insistent and couldn't seem to understand that he wanted to be left alone, or that he didn't care what he had to say. But Evurn did like his staff. It was etched with runes that he had not read before, and seemed to brim with a strange type of energy, even within a tavern with no obvious enchantments, to enrich the magic in the air. After some awkward stares, Evurn figured it was time to try to scare this man away in the simplest of ways.
I kill people,
He said.
Oh? What a wonderful pastime. I kill people as well, just not as readily as it seems you might. If you're trying to scare me away, it will not work. Lots of people try to scare me away. If I told you who some of my friends were, you might be scared.
Evurn figured that was an interesting enough reply, and at this point, the man was no headhunter. He was talking too much. The man before him was either suicidal or insane, or maybe a bit of both. As much as he didn't want to, his curiosity was starting to come out.
It seems I cannot detract you from talking to me.
Very good. Then maybe we can get going on our little journey then. You see, it seems I'm looking for a small trinket of power, and it's not too far from here, give or take a little bit of a trip. I didn't pick you out of all these whale-guzzling fools because I liked you, but I actually think you're the only person in this entire tavern who might be of assistance to me. How much do you know about the gods? Or is your speciality simply to run north from the Shadowlands, avoiding the Blood Elves, perhaps?
Evurn's own staff was laying across his lap under the table, and his hand went to it. How did this man know his past? He had not told anyone of why he was going north, and the few who knew were already dead.
You do not need to fear me, but fate has put us upon the same road. Now, I care little to harm you, so you may release the grip upon your weapon. Now, about the gods. Go on.
Evurn stared at the man and felt a calmness come over himself. It was no spell for the figure before him, but he felt at ease in the strangest of ways. He decided to answer.
Well, I know they exist. What more do you want to know about them? It is not like I go drinking with the gods on a daily basis. I do not get invited to the big events unless you mean a particular god of death. I have sent plenty to him. He owes me gold, at least as I see it.
No. Not Vanku. I would like to avoid death for now. I'm talking of Wura.
The trickster. Yes, I know of Wura. But that's about all I know, and all the knowledge I care to have of him.
Well, good sir, please follow me outside. We will get right along with our little journey.
Lorlaam stood up and waited for Evurn to finish chugging his ale.
You know, strange man. I read once of a wizard who showed up randomly where he wasn't exactly wanted, pulling some person who wanted to be left alone on an adventure, and there was a dragon and a few other problems. The shadow elf is done with dragons.
Lorlaam laughed.
I think I read that book.
This man literally had an answer for everything. Evurn wondered if he should tell him he had half a mind to take one of those elven fishers once they were drunk enough and slash their throat for a bit of a decent dinner. Cannibals weren't normally accepted in normal society, but it didn't matter in the end. Evurn had half a thought that Lorlaam would sit down next to him and want a bite of an elven finger or two for himself. He shivered as the ocean gusts tore through him as they proceeded to the docks, and to a small but seaworthy boat awaiting them. Above, the polar lights in the sky reminded him of how far north he truly was. Before he had left the mainland of the south, he was told of the lights of the northern skies. Now he could see them for himself. The shimmering glow of greens and reds rippling across from horizon to horizon were suddenly much brighter, or so they appeared, as Lorlaam pushed them away from the docks and pulled the small sail up to catch the wind. Evurn wasn't quite sure what to make of Lorlaam. The journey was one of silence, and while Evurn enjoyed it, it added to the mystery of where, in fact, they were actually going. Several hours passed, and he noticed through periodic episodes of sleepiness that they were drawing close to an island. It was a strange place. On top of the island was a tower of some sort, with a glowing orb floating above it, appearing like it was floating in the clouds cover itself. As they came close to the mooring, Evurn noticed a lone figure standing on a stone dock. The current pushed them closer to the island in a sudden small wave, and as they came along the docks, Lorlaam tossed a rope to the figure, who quickly tied it off.
You come back so soon?
Lorlaam smiled and rather exuberantly walked up to the figure.
I have arrived, you could say. I have found a good man to help me with my adventures. Or not really a man, but an elf or something.
I am a shadow elf,
Evurn corrected. Evurn knew what those words meant to most. Shadow elves were known mostly as assassins, though that was not something he really did anymore. He did have an extensive understanding of alchemical devices and magic in general, but his preference was poisons. The figure didn't respond, but it also didn't show preference to any of the sad jokes Lorlaam tried to come up with as they began up a long stairwell that twisted all the way up until they were well above the ocean, and the lights from the strange place atop the island were so bright it became difficult to see.
One last joke,
Lorlaam said.
If you cross a dragon with a half-elf, what can you get?
a headache.
Evurn said. The glowing orb hovering in the clouds above them was many times brighter than even the sun.
No, that's wrong. That's not even funny.
Not your excuse for a joke. I was trying to ignore your rambles.
He motioned up above them.
This light.
But just as Evurn said that, it seemed the brightness receded. At the top of this island, of all the possibilities he expected, he was not expecting to find several nearly nude women who looked alien to anything he had ever killed. They were humanoid, but of a deep green in color, and their bodies shimmered as if he were looking at a jewel. The women danced around a fountain, sending waves of colored energy into the air. Evurn could not let himself become distracted, and it might have been a pretty place of beauty, but he was still being dragged somewhere and wasn't sure why he was there. There was a single female, not nude, but as scantily clad as she was, she might as well have been nude. She approached him and made a single motion with her finger across his lips.
It does seem you have brought someone who might be of the caliber you will need if you are to pass your test,
she said. Lorlaam laughed.
Perhaps so. But even if he is not good enough, he will get me close enough to my goal.
At this point, Evurn really wondered what was going on, and he was more so wishing he would have found himself a tasty elf or dwarf to eat before he got here. He gave thought to leave, but as he did, Lorlaam simply shook his head.
Listen,
Evurn said.
I decided to go with this stranger and to take part in whatever we are taking part in near duress, to be completely honest. I have no idea what's being asked of me, and I have no understanding of even where I am. I am new to these seas, and I came here to be left alone. I don't even know what you people here are. You're not elves or shadow elves, and you're not dwarves or the race of men, yet you look as if you are. There is something strange about all of this.
The female smiled and began to walk over in a seductive way, moving with a certain sway to her gait and a large grin.
Well, that's not going to work. I don't really care for such pleasures as some may.
She continued to smile.
I wasn't offering anything to you, elf, but I do want to let you know that while you might see a beautiful female standing before you, and I know that we are beautiful in your eyes, we're not real, and we are but one person, one god, and all of us are here just to mess with your mind. You are indeed not like those of normal mind, like sirens tempting sailors. This is but a small test. You are accepted within the boundaries of the challenge.
The females suddenly began to walk into one another, their bodies blending in flashes of what appeared to be a white magic of some kind. Evurn looked at them as they merged together, forming one strange fiery orb.
What's this?
Evurn asked. The fiery orb began to become just as the polar lights looked high above them. It was then a voice spoke out.
I am Wura, known as the Trickster. You have come to one of the holy sites where the polar lights are painted into your world. Upon stepping here, you were no longer in the living realm, but within my realm. What you see is what I wish you to see. Your friend here wants you to embark on a small journey with him, a journey I am sure he will die upon. Because you are here, you've been chosen. He cannot back out. You know that all food and drink that you might want will be provided for you within. You will be in a place just like you were when he found you, and from the smell of alcohol still on your breath, I assume that was the tavern.
So, I guess you're not an omnipotent god?
Evurn asked. Wura laughed.
I guess you could say you are right with that assumption. But it does not matter. Many, many ages ago, I went about collecting pets of many kinds, and I put little hints down on your world, and it seems your friend here has found the way into my realm. I am a fair god, and if he can succeed in the trials and obtain the staff, he may have it. But beware, there are more than mere beasts within this place you go to. You will face monsters unlike anything you have ever seen, but at least you will have your magic. I, for one, will enjoy watching my pets devour you both."
The god vanished, but the pool where the female figures had been dancing began to swirl, glowing a deep red and then blue, alternating between the two colors.
"Well, I guess we should step in."
Lorlaam asked. Evurn had not had many moments in his life when he completely regretted his steps. The thought of embarking on this little adventure suddenly tore at him. This was not why he had come to the Glacial Seas. He had come here to simply be left alone. As he went to walk away, he suddenly noticed that the stairwell he had ascended before was gone. The grand ocean view he had admired as he walked up the stairwell was gone too. The very walls surrounding them shimmered with a strange light, and now, if he looked up, out, or down, he saw only stars.
"Is this some kind of trick?"
Lorlaam laughed.
"Of course. It is the way of the trickster, Woora."
As his friend, or more so in his opinion, a fiendish acquaintance, jumped into the pool, he immediately disappeared. With nowhere to go and no chance to leave this place, he followed Lorlaam into the strange, swirling portal he assumed would not result in his sudden, unfortunate death. Stepping into the portal, a wave of cold, dark water rushed over him, but he did not become wet. Though he could not see, he could feel his body moving and twisting in the strangest of sensations, unlike anything he could describe. As the darkness subsided at last, he emerged from the other side of the portal, and it was like he was in a cave. He thought. At first glance, it looked like a cave only because he saw something made of crystal ahead of him, but the longer he stared at the glowing light, the more it looked like a moon high above him. He wondered if his eyes were tricking him. The world was nothing like the world he had come from. As he stepped forward, he could feel the vibrations of the air around him. First, it was something like a dream. He could feel the world shifting to his presence as if he was not supposed to be there, and that the literal structure of the environment was transforming to allow him passage. A few moments passed, and his vision became clear, and he learned he was not in a cave but was standing on an island stretched out before him. A massive volcano in the distance was the only discernible landmark this time. There were no trees, no bushes, only rock with strange crystal formations growing out of them. Lorlaam seemed disturbed by their environment as much as Evurn was.
"Well, we're here."
"And what exactly is this place we are at?"
"It is a realm of the god Woora, a place I've been searching for many years, and what will lead us to a great treasure."
"And why did you drag me to this place? I was perfectly content where I was. I did not need to be taken here. I did not want to come here. You literally kidnapped me and brought me here."
Lorlaam shook his head and kind of just smiled as they began to walk forward.
"You are a wizard or mage of considerable power. I can sense it,"
Evurn said.
"but I believe I could have killed you if I wished. As it seems right now, I should have actually done that. Frankly, you do not look very appetizing. You are of the race of men, and perhaps too old for me to actually eat you, especially when there are younger, tastier treats to be had."
"That is a fair assessment, and I'm happy I do not look appetizing to you. I also want to say that there are stranger beings than cannibals this far north, though I do find it strange that you are here as well. I would not say I am of the race of men, either."
"I am so sorry that it is strange for you to find me here. I had thought that going this way would result in me being left alone. It is clear that was not true. What are you, if not of the race of men?"
"My own race,"
Lorlaam replied.
"Let us go."
Whatever realm they had come upon or been sent to, there was a clear-cut road leading from where they were to a small, double-storied cottage. The cottage itself was quaint enough. made of rock with a thatch roof and a chimney that billowed out a plume of dark smoke. This place, at first glance, appeared to be more than a simple inn or tavern, and had a much larger wing off the one side that seemed to materialize as they approached. Along the road just before the door, there was a statue of a tall beast with long arms and a hairy body.
Strange statue,
Evurn said.
Oh yes, strange, smelly. Anyway, here we go.
Reaching the door, they noticed there wasn't even a lock, but considering where they were, Evurn wasn't expecting too much to make sense. This island had no roads going anywhere else. Second to that, the biggest thing he noticed was that there were no birds or any other animals in this place. Lorlaam was the first one to the door, and though he paused to knock, he instead just pushed it open. Evurn followed him, and entering the strange abode, he saw an exact replica of the tavern he was in before, minus, of course, any actual patrons, except for a single barmaid standing against the back wall, polishing a glass as they walked in. Weaving through several wooden pillars, they noticed a massive fireplace on one side of the room. The more they looked around, the more they saw of what could be described as a few additions to their memory of the tavern in the Glacial Seas. There was a cauldron near the fire bubbling with some type of stew, but Evurn did not recognize the scent of it. There was a table with 2 chairs, and 2 slightly more comfortable chairs were near the fire. Looking further and around the edge of the corner to a sleeping room, there were 2 beds made with a fine silver blanket covering each of them. They walked up to the actual bar and sat down.
"What brings you around?"
The woman said.
Just a little adventure the great god decided to allow me, and my friend, of course, to venture upon. We'll have the simplest brew you have. I say something light, an ale that won't weigh us down for our future ventures.
The woman gave a slight smile.
"The place you find yourself within was created by the god Wura for just the purpose it is needed for. It will be a focal point as you move from trial to trial, and you will find that we are always open and willing to serve you in whatever way you need as long as you're here, or more so, alive. If by chance you both actually succeed in the trials, one way back to your own realm will be found here. Furthermore, we have an extensive library of books and many items to be had as they are needed for your trials."
As she poured them a golden brown ale, she smiled again.
"This is a place of your own thought, formed from memories both of the past and present. While you are within the realm, you will need little rest or food, but what is offered here can be enjoyed at will. You will find all paths return here."
At least we won't get lost.
Lorlaam joked. She smiled again.
"If you are already here, we should not waste any more time. Time is valuable. Life is valuable, and if you're going to die, we might as well just get on with it."
The woman had several very small discs in her hand. Though he swore she wasn't holding anything only a second ago, now he could see a silver, a gold, and a black disc. Inscribed on each disc were single runic symbols.
"The first one shall be easy. Relatively speaking, if you can defeat this one, well, the rest should be quite simple, maybe."
Tossing each of the discs out onto the floor, there were several small flashes each time one struck the wood. Each of them flashed a different color. The silver flashed blue, the gold flashed red, and the black flashed silver. Each of the discs spun and shifted in a peculiar pattern on the floor, forming, in the end, a large triangle that began to flash white repeatedly. Several lines began to glow on the floor as if they were actually carved into the wood. Then a wall of blue and red and silver appeared, splashing the room in bright colors and causing Lorlaam and Evurn to shield their eyes for the moment. A portal had been opened before them.
A doorway to another realm,
Lorlaam said. Evurn was not too sure exactly what he was staring at. It had been some time since he was in the southern lands in the realm known as the Shadowlands. He was a student of both darker magics and blade work, But in all his many travels in the dungeons, dark and mountains high, he was surprised. He'd never quite seen something exactly like what he was seeing here.
This path
The woman said with a slightly sly smile.
is open.
Evurn looked over to Lorlaam and noticed that he was checking many small potions on a belt on his waist. Several of the potions were blue, others red, a little green, a few clear, and at least one was sparkling. Then Lorlaam looked at his staff and adjusted the crystal on top of it, and it seemed veins of magic exploded down the wood, eating away at the actual staff itself.
I'd say I'm ready,
Lorlaam said.
Well, I am glad one of us is. I had not actually planned to die today. In fact, I was hoping to actually get into a bit of potion making. Poisons really, but potions nonetheless.
Lorlaam tapped a small collection of potions at his belt.
Well, I enjoy potion making, and no one said you can't make potions. As we were told when we got here, everything we could need is here.
Lorlaam pointed to a dark corner that Evurn had not even noticed yet. It was like it was appearing as by purely Evurn's desire for it. Where before was nothing but would appeared a large table with all the typical potion-making needs, bubbling water, infusers, and empty bottles. Okay, that is the strangest thing I have ever seen. That was not there before.
Indeed, it wasn't until you stated you needed it.
We need a way out of here.
That isn't exactly how this works,
Lorlaam said. There was no more time for debate. Lorlaam gripped his staff and the crystal at its tip began to spin. He stepped forward, walking to the blue side of the triangle. As he stepped in, he disappeared. The side of the triangle he had walked into went dark, leaving only the red and silver-colored portals. Evurn lifted up his own staff, wondering what was going to happen when he actually stepped forward. He now wondered if the portal open before him was going to take him to the same place Lorlaam went. The woman watching just smiled. He never much cared for females, especially when they smiled in awkward ways. He always thought they were conniving in some way. In fact, the smell of a female of any race was worse than any elixir of mind control. A female could drive a man mad, and it was that seething lack of self-control that they caused, that he hated. This was it. He stepped forward, looking into the shimmering pool before him, the wall of magic, the portal to where he could only guess. He stepped into the silver side of the portal, and suddenly all he could see was blackness. He felt pulled forward, squeezed, and then the sensation of being torn apart. Evurn emerged on the other side to the smell of old stone and putrid soil. He coughed, rubbing his eyes to try to clear the haziness before him. He used his staff to shine a light on where he was. He had emerged in a structure of some kind. The portal he emerged through gave a few moments of additional light. He was surrounded by gray stone. As the portal fizzled out, any minuscule amount of light from the magic that had brought him here was gone. He did not see the other wizard anywhere. From where he stood, the only door to the room itself looked quite small. He carefully approached the door and tapped it with his staff, honestly checking if what was before him was real. He reached down and attempted to pull it open. The door cracked and a slight wind blew upon him in the sliver of light. He noticed a strange light, not at all like the sun from the world he was in before, but a place that had none of the natural colors he was used to. As he pushed the door fully open, he entered a world unlike anything he had ever seen. The sky did not have a single cloud, and its twilight glow upon the land made it difficult to tell if it was closer to dawn or dusk. He was shocked to see massive mushrooms the size of large trees, not to mention gargantuan flowers as far as the eye could see. Wherever he was, it was nothing like the Glacial Seas. Chapter 2. Lone Wizard. Evurn had no doubt entered a strange region. The further he moved from the door, the more the sky seemed to change. From an opaque gray, it shifted to a deep violet. As he descended into the valley, he noticed there was a single road leading forward. Turning to look behind him, he just saw a wall of mountains with no discernible path up to them. Looking down toward a valley, he noticed the trees around him, leading down that way, blowing with the wind. Suddenly, the wind fell silent. The world became still. He felt as if something moved through him, and in a gust of the wind, the trees became as giant mushrooms. He had never seen mushrooms so large, nor a tree change form. Being the herbalist he was, one of his first thoughts were what he could actually make from such a plant. He walked up to one of the titan-sized mushrooms and pulled out a small knife. Cutting some of the flesh, his blade caused the release of a red dust into the air. He stepped away, holding his robe over his mouth. It was a bit dangerous to breathe in any spores from an unknown substance. He took a sample from the mushroom and put it into a pouch. Turning and looking around, he noticed the sun above piercing through the violet skies.
I feel like I've eaten mushrooms of a different kind,
he said aloud to himself. He turned away from the giant mushroom and went back to the road. He walked for a good while longer, coming at last to the far end of the valley where it began to ascend up into a rocky pass, and that left the valley. Upon reaching the top of this road, he then saw an endless expanse of the same massive mushrooms behind him. He had no idea why he was here, and he had seen no sign of Lorlaam. He was wondering what kind of adventure he had gotten himself into. With no real clue as to which direction he needed to go or could go, he began down toward the mushrooms, when a sudden explosion of mushroom pieces to the east turned his attention. There was something moving through the mushrooms themselves. He could hear what sounded like blades striking the ground repeatedly. Considering what was moving, the mushrooms was so far away, he was surprised how loud it was. He looked up and noticed that the violet sky had become crystallized, not fluid at all as a normal sky. It was literally like he was within some strange orb. He saw something far in the distance emerge for a moment, just over the top of the mushrooms. At first look, it appeared like it might even be a titan snake of his own lands. Those were creatures relative to dragons, but not capable of actual flight. As more of its body began to rise over the top of the mushrooms, he noticed that it had multiple segments that, with each passing moment, became more visible. As it crawled up and hopped from mushroom to mushroom, it literally tore apart the soft caps with jagged legs that appeared almost innumerable.
I am dreaming, or this is a massive bug of some kind.
Evurn wasn't sure what it was, only that it was coming toward him. This strange land he was in was unlike any he'd ever seen, but as he lifted his staff, his magic worked as in any other place. He shot a single bolt of energy at the creature just as its first few jagged and dagger-like legs began to stab the ground level with him, vibrating under his feet. The magic blast struck its body, shattering pieces of its outer shell but not slowing the creature. It sounded like 100 horses charging into battle, with dust and dirt flying into the air as the creature squealed. A moment later, spikes protruded from its head, and a blast of green streamed toward him like arrows from his enemy. Crouched down and bringing his staff up, he cast a blue ward to block the creature's attack. The repeated strikes disintegrated against his shield, and he exhaled in relief. He'd never seen such a thing, but he had a few tricks. As the creature was nearly upon him, he rushed forward, aiming his staff to the ground. He shot a blast of magic into the earth, producing a large vine. Grabbing hold of it as it grew up and over the creature, he prepared to attack from above. The creature smashed into his vine, throwing him high into the air, but he kept his focus, turned his staff around, and shot a blast of fire into the creature's segments. This seemed to have a great effect, but as the segments began to burn and roll off its body, it grew new ones almost as quickly. Evurn shot a blast of magic at the ground, using the cones of energy to catch himself just before he struck the rocky surface. The creature turned to pursue him. The only place Evurn had to go was the massive forest of mushrooms. He sprinted, running as quickly as he could, trying to vanish within the mountainous caps. The creature dove into the mushroom forest, spraying another volley of its poisonous barbs that struck all around Evurn. The creature attempted to push through the mighty trunks, but it could not break through. He was trying to think of some way to stop the creature, to defeat what was before him, and to finish this test as he understood it was. It would have been nice if Lorlaam might have joined him, as he'd believed he was going to. But he was used to being alone. Why change it now? He thought of the many different conjuration spells he knew and herbal mixtures he had on him. He decided on one, and it would be risky.
That might do,
He thought to himself. Well before he had come to the Glacial Seas, he came across a creature that could shrink in size. It was a furry creature, a swamp rat only seen in the southern region of the Shadowlands. It would use this skill to hide from the massive gator beast found in those regions, and it was a particular hard creature to even catch. He'd only used this special elixir one other time before now, and while he didn't like to admit of the devilry he had once been a part of, that one time worked very well to strike down the massive troll he had been sent to kill. At least the troll had made him a cup of tea. This bug had straight out attacked him. It deserved what was coming to it. Evurn ran quicker than the creature chasing him. He made some distance away from it, and now he just heard the stabbing blades that were its legs, tearing apart the top of the mushroom forest. He fell behind a rock, reaching around his waist, trying to find the elixir he'd made from the transforming mammal of the swamps. None of the closest ones to the front of his belt were it. He pushed aside a few different poisons and one potion of invisibility, and found the small white vial that contained exactly what he needed. As the massive centipede sent pieces of mushroom all over Evurn's back, he popped the top to his potion and waited to get a good shot at the creature. It snaked above him, blocking out what little light was above. He heard its hiss again and the warm, strange smell of its breath as its head emerged just above him, turned his nose. It opened its mouth. Its teeth, if he could call them teeth, were shifting and glistening with what Evurn figured was some type of venom.
Here's a drink for you,
Evurn yelled. He threw the potion at the creature, striking the center of its head. The creature hissed and began toward him, its body shifting above Evurn. But as his head came closer, it began to shrink, and not just a little, but suddenly its head was no larger than a grape. The rest of its body quickly followed suit, and soon the creature slipped between the cracks of the caps of the mushroom forest and fell before Evurn. As the shadow elf stood up, he kicked the centipede now in its minuscule form.
Sorry, bug.
He laughed. As he stomped the once monstrous beast, the mushrooms around him faded away, and he was standing on the rocky island in which he and Lorlaam had come to before. A frigid gust howled around him. He stared ahead, seeing the strange tavern and looking around for his friend. He started down the road back toward the tavern, and it was then he saw a statue of the creature he had defeated now next to the other statue that was there when they had arrived. He went to the tavern door and pushed it open, finding Lorlaam himself sitting there with the woman from before.
Evurn, I see you were successful.
Evurn pointed at Lorlaam.
Yes, I was.
He said, emphasizing the fact that he was alone.
And where did you go?
Lorlaam laughed, clapping his hands together.
That first bit was just another test. I had already completed my test at a time well before now. But I knew you wouldn't go unless it looked like we were both going together. My test was a bit smelly, as I said of the statue when we arrived. I was afraid you would think this was some trick if I had told you that you were to face a beast alone. Now, my friend, you see how the games of the god Wura go. You get sent to a strange place, find a strange beast, and you figure out some way to defeat it one way or the other.
Evurn shook his head.
So, this is what this is. Random trials in which I hope I survive for you to get something you want.
As Evurn looked around, he noticed that, aside from the area for creating potions, there was a change of clothing as well as 2 large silver shields. Evurn stood up and went to the strange inclusions now within the cottage, and noticed a large water pouch as well.
So, what is this?
Lorlaam took a swig of his drink and stood up.
It's what we will need for our next trial.
As Lorlaam joined Evurn and began a rather quick change of attire, the woman approached and smiled.
So will you need any rest, food, or drink before the next trial?
Before Evurn could answer, Lorlaam did instead.
No. We are both good.
Evurn had strong feelings about someone answering questions for him, but instead of saying something, he felt the better they just get going with these tasks.
Yes, we are both good,
he said with a clear lie on his tongue.
Very well then.
This time, the woman did not do as she did before. She went to the bar and returned with 3 bags. The bags were very small, smaller than even a coin purse people would carry when going to the market. She walked over to where Lorlaam and Evurn were standing and poured a circle with the first bag, revealing the fine black powder. When she was done with that bag, she dropped it. Then, taking the other 2 bags, she opened them both and held them together as she made a crisscross pattern on top of the circle. These bags contained a silver dust with red speckles and what looked to be simple sand. As the last of the strange powdery substance poured out, the circle began to glow and the crisscross started flashing with bursts of white. A few moments later, it seemed that a wall of light appeared in the tavern, forming a perfect column from where she had poured the substances. As both Evurn and Lorlaam stood staring at the portal before them, a wisp of sand flew into the tavern.
Come now, friend,
Lorlaam teased.
Perhaps it is a tropical beach. I love beaches.
Into the portal now!
The woman commanded. Evurn and Lorlaam were now fully dressed and held their shields in their left hands with their staves in their right. Lorlaam, like before, entered the portal first, and this time Evurn was quick to follow him, as if that would make a difference between this time and last. It at least made sense to him. They stepped on the other side of the portal. He immediately felt a searing on his skin. His shielded his eyes from a blinding light. It was nothing like the glacial seas, nothing like the frozen wasteland in which he had wished to hide. As he began to see beyond the darkness from the sudden shift in light, all around him were rolling sand dunes. The sky above them was deepest blue he had seen. There were no clouds and only piercing hot white sun burning above them. To add on to the mystery of the location, there was a massive tower in the center of a small oasis not too far away from them. It was a strange place, and Evurn expected that it would only get stranger. Chapter 3. A Desert Tower.
We no doubt need to go toward the tower,
Lorlaam said.
So easy,
Evurn asked.
Likely not. We were not given the shields for mere encouragement.
They began to walk toward a large tower. In the open sands, the oasis was extremely tempting to them. Evurn looked around, assuming something would emerge from the sand. His mind conjured images of some strange insect horse, snake-like creature revealing itself from within the dunes and slashing into their flesh. But as he looked down toward the ground, a shadow passed over them. Evurn paused, staring up, but he did not see anything. Lorlaam stopped too, having seen the shadow, but he quickly returned to walking. Evurn turned. He saw something. He ran forward and pulled Lorlaam to look just as the creature revealed itself. It was a brown bird with bright red wingtips. It had a pronounced beak that almost seemed as if it was made of glass.
A roc, an ancient creature of the times before men and elves. The god Wura was known to have many of these creatures, but it is not its talons alone you must worry about. The beak has a way to erupt with extremely potent magic.
A few seconds directly after Lorlaam gave his warning, the sand before them suddenly became as crystal as a bright beam shot down out of the sky, and the shriek of the rock forced them to their knees. Evurn and Lorlaam pointed their staves up, casting several blasts of magic as the creature flew just over them.
Go! We must get to the oasis,
Lorlaam shouted. The rock was making another pass. From high in the sky, its shadow followed Evurn and Lorlaam, growing larger and larger as its form nearly overtook them. As the ground shook with its weight striking the sand, Evurn pointed his staff with his free hand at the creature's face, releasing a blast of yellow magic, an entangling vine to keep the creature down. The spell twisted and wrapped around its form before pulling the rock down into the sand. Evurn turned to catch up with Lorlaam, who was nearly in the trees, when he felt the temperature behind him becoming much hotter than it was before. He turned, bringing his shield up just as the creature's attack struck. He moved to the side, and part of his shield melted. The creature had missed him, but just by a few inches, and had it struck him directly, he expected the shield would have been worthless.
What the hell are the shields for if they just simply break to the creature's force?
Evurn shouted to Lorlaam. Lorlaam was already much further ahead into the oasis. Evurn entered the line of trees and jumped over several rocks at the direct perimeter. An oasis, indeed. Just a few paces in, they found a large spring. The water bubbled and fairies floated over it. Large flowers dotted the banks, and as they went up to one side of the embankment, he noticed there was, in fact, a road, and he saw his companion already further down the road. Even with the screams of the rock behind them, there was no more comfort to be found in this place.
My spell withhold the creature down for some time, or least I hope it will. The thing melted my shield.
No material can withstand the blast of a rock. The shields were not for that creature.
Evurn shook his head in disbelief.
Oh, then how many creatures are here, Lorlaam? I believe there was only one creature per trial.
Lorlaam turned and pointed down the road.
This way. And how am I supposed to know how many creatures are here? I've never been to this place. Mushroom forests, well, that is a different story.
It was clear to Evurn that while his friend had not been completely truthful before, it seemed as if he was being truthful now. They came to a gallery of stone statues of the strangest design. The first prominent feature was a grotesque face and a horned head. The body appeared like some form of a reptile with scales. The strangest thing, at least to Evurn, was that its tail was like that of a scorpion.
These are Vrekleon, truly terrible beasts of lore and myth. But it seems as if someone has seen them, and they are more than simple myths. If this is indeed what is within this temple, I would warn you not to look at it in the eyes. It is said that its eyes can turn you to dust, and its stinging tail is worse than a scorpion of our world. Its hide is like that of a dragon, and cannot be pierced by even the strongest of our weapons, though it is said that magic can hurt the creature.
It was a bit further, but they had now reached the tower. Here they noticed that the lower portion of the tower was much wider than the upper. The tower itself was made of the sheer polished white stone, reaching high into the desert sky. But there was no door that they could discern from this angle. Instead, they found a large, dimly lit cave that led underneath the structure. They both cast their own spells of light as they entered the dark area.
We do not necessarily have to kill the creatures. I learned we can defeat the temple by finding the hidden artifact within.
What kind of artifact?
An orb,
He told him.
While the first test does require us to defeat the creatures, we need a total of 3 orbs. The orb is a symbol that we were able to survive long enough to reach a particular destination. Getting to this tower was a small feat in comparison to what it will take to actually get this orb. If I had to guess, I would say it is near the top of this tower.
Well, the bird creature is outside, so you don't have to worry about that, but this other beast, whatever you call it, hopefully, we can just outrun it. Perhaps you can even use a similar spell as you used on the bird.
A fine plan. However, the Vreklion is said to work in packs. They have a tight family bond, and supposedly in the ancient oceans of the still-forming world of the great poet, they would inhabit entire islands, devouring any that stepped foot upon their land. But this is no island, and in fact, this entire temple is likely their realm.
The dark path they were upon began to level out and then ascend back up. Ahead of them was torchlight coming down into the passage. As they neared the actual light, they noticed a small stairwell. They were entering the lowest portion of the tower. They doused their light, making a point to slowly move up into the opening with their shields up and their staves over the top of the shields. The lowest level of the temple was a dimly lit, empty room. There seemed to be some form of a carcass nearby. Evurn crept toward it and knelt, looking at the large creature about the size of the statues outside.
It seems that their food is indeed each other. This is what we face here,
Lorlaam told him. Evurn looked at the creature now in flesh and blood form versus the stone it was before. It was then he heard a clicking sound somewhere in the lower level. The single clicking sound continued one after another, more clicking sounds vibrating across the walls of the structure. The clicks became louder and more frequent. It seemed they were forming a crescendo, rising in rhythm and sound until they came to a high note and held the tone of the clicking. It was so fast it seemed as if it was only a single sound, and then the clicking ceased. The room fell silent, and torches around them suddenly burst to life, casting orange and red flames all over the ceiling. Evurn and Lorlaam were back to back, their staves up and their shields out. A scratching sound reverberated throughout the entire tower as they spotted several red eyes moving through the darkness. Neither of them waited for the other to act, both sending blasts of magic directly into the air. As light exploded, shining down as the beasts attacked, they shot spells at the creatures as they approached. It was only a few seconds before the two wizards were separated. Evurn kept his eyes toward the creature's feet, moving backward in a circular pattern, holding up his shield to protect himself from the several strikes and slashes of the scorpion tail. The creature forced him to the wall of the lower level. With his staff out, he cast an orange blast, throwing the creature back. He sidestepped, casting 2 more blasts. The creature fell dead, but then 2 more of the creatures were upon him. He shot a blast of green at the ground, creating a vine that spun upward, circling to the top level of the tower. He grabbed a potion from his belt, throwing it to the ground at the 2 monsters before him. They suddenly turned on one another. The confusion potion would only last so long.
Come on, Lorlaam.
As Evurn jumped up on the vine and began running up to its ever-growing top, Lorlaam followed, fleeing the confused creatures. Lorlaam spun his staff towards the ground, summoning one of the largest fireballs Evurn had ever seen. In an explosion of flames, he tossed it at the creatures as they attempted to follow up the vine. The fiery spell caught the vine on fire, eating away at the lower portion and stopping its upward growth. They made it to another level, and as Evurn jumped from the vine onto the upper terrace of the tower, he noticed the vine itself was collapsing.
Lorlaam, the vine gives way. Jump to me.
Evurn dropped to his stomach, holding his staff down to where Lorlaam could soon grab it. His companion hurried upward, but Evurn noticed the creatures were jumping and gripping the shattering vine, pulling it down faster with Lorlaam still only halfway up. At the moment it looked like Lorlaam was about to fall down to the brood of creatures beneath him. The wizard dropped his shield and grabbed his staff. In an undulating glow of blue and white magic, Lorlaam became covered in his own spell and floated up to where Evurn was. As he landed, he struggled to catch his breath.
That was close.
Evurn said.
Strange magic that I have not seen.
I'm no mere wizard, friend. And I am still more than a simple Roosis.
At this point, Evurn did not even know that Lorlaam was a Roosis, the natural-born elemental magic casters of the world.
I would not have guessed you to be one of those. You have a staff, and most of your kind do not carry such devices.
The creatures below them were climbing up the walls, and one was already nearing their level.
A story for another time, I assure you,
Lorlaam told him. They glanced around their surroundings, spotting bright light on the otherwise shadowed, shrouded upper level. By chance, they noticed the passage leading away from the large open area they had come from, and as they followed the upward curving hall, they discovered it was quickly taking them to the higher reaches of the tower. The echoing clicks began again, and though they were running away from the main area and open spots of the tower, it seemed as if the clicks were bending around the corner.
Are these creatures blind?
Evurn questioned.
It seems to be so, but that is not something I knew about them. We must be even more careful of our footfalls.
Now, instead of simply sprinting as hard as they could and ascending the actual tower, they both moved with the quietest steps possible. This was something that Evurn had the advantage on. In his time before the Glacial Seas, in his much younger days, silence and killing were a specialty to his people that all shadow elves embraced. Unfortunately, no matter how quiet he was, his companion on this adventure was not very quiet at all. The creatures were gaining on them. They could hear the beasts getting louder with their combined clicking once again, almost as if it was a pack call that they were gaining on their prey. With some degree of luck, they came to a stone ladder that went straight up to a large wooden hatch. They both began up, ascending as quickly as they could and reaching the wooden hatch. With some amount of force, Lorlaam was able to push it open, splashing them both with the hot sun above. They climbed through the opening, and as their eyes slowly adjusted to the blinding light, there on a white pedestal was a glowing yellow orb. Evurn grabbed the orb and tucked it away in his robes.
This is it.
Evurn looked around, waiting for them to be taken from the realm, but it did not happen.
What are you doing?
Lorlaam asked him, noticing he was standing there with his arms open.
We are done. We got the orb. Why have we not been taken back to the tavern?
Unfortunately, that only happens if you kill the beasts within our testing grounds.
At that moment, a shadow passed over the sun, and they noticed that their friend from before had spotted them atop the tower. They both looked down the way they had come and saw the red eyes growing brighter as they looked down. Evurn shut the hatch.
We're not going that way.
The rock was lining up for a pass against them. Its beak began to glow, the rays of the sun concentrated into the blast.
We have only one way. Trust me with this, friend.
Lorlaam grabbed Evurn, pulling him from the top of the tower and falling into a freefall, just as the rock's blast turned the tower into flaming rubble. Evurn struggled to get his staff into position to cast some sort of spell to slow their descent, but Lorlaam held him tighter, bringing his own staff up, shining a bright white light that appeared like a massive lotus flower closing upon them and slowing their descent. As soon as their boots touched sand, they stumbled forward in a rush to get back into the oasis and head in the direction they had originally come. As they ran, they heard the clicking sound again, and Evurn looked behind him to see that the large creatures known as Vreklion were closing in on them.
We must get to where we first came into this world. If we can get there while holding the orb, we'll be able to escape,
Lorlaam told him. The massive bird was already upon them again, releasing another blast that turned the sand before them into crystals. The sudden eruption of the crystals tripped the both of them, causing them to stumble and fall into one another. Evurn turned to see the shadow of the beast descend upon him. A moment later, he grabbed at the creature's feathers, attempting to avoid the rock's snapping beak. He shoved his staff into the creature's breast and fired a blast of arcane fire that singed the feathers and forced the bird upward. It was then from his side Lorlaam struck the creature in the wing, and it turned, scratching its talons around in the sand like a stumbling chicken. Evurn pushed himself up, moving away from the rock just to hear the combined rapid clickings of the scorpion-like creatures. Evurn spotted a very clear view of them now. Their faces were disgusting, like orc filth, and the horns upon their heads seemed to be glistening in the sunlight, as if they had some fluid running off them. In truth, he wished he could sample said fluid and collect a bit in a vial, considering it would probably have special alchemical properties. But that quickly fled from his mind as the creatures jumped upon them, slamming their curved tails into the sand, just missing them. Evurn and Lorlaam did not have many more options left. As the scorpion creatures circled around them, the rock bounced around on the ground, attempting to peck at both of them. It seemed that for a moment the bird was about to try to take to the air again and ascend toward the sun. This seemed to be tied to its ability to charge its other weapon, the strange beam it could fire from its beak. As it lowered its body and began to flap its wings, Evurn jumped on the creature. He pulled himself up to its head and used the staff to send blasts of magic towards where the scorpion creatures were scratching in the sand and clicking erratically. Evurn wasn't too sure what his plan actually was at this point, but he was working to figure it out. As quickly as he was realizing what was happening, Lorlaam made a point to get to the bird as quickly as possible. Strangely, the bird creature was standing still. Its attention was now on the scorpion creatures, and their focus was now on the rock. It seemed that whatever realm they were in, the two creatures had never really dealt with one another. And now, as Evurn still sat on top of the bird, firing his staff at the scorpion beasts, the beasts responded by attacking the rock. As one of them jumped and attempted to plunge its tail into the rock, the bird snapped its beak, crunching the creature and leaving a bloody mess as pieces fell upon the sand. Evurn nearly fell off as the bird took to the sky, not actually rising too high, but enough to where the crystal at the tip of its beak began to glow brightly. Evurn clenched his eyes as the rock roasted several of the reptiles in a blinding eruption of its power. But it seemed that with Evurn's extra weight, the bird could not fly away and instead tumbled in a heaping mass to the ground, causing an audible crack to one of its legs as it threw Evurn into the sand. The scorpions slammed their tails into the rock, actually able to pierce its hide. The punctures left from the scorpions' tails began to glow green, festering with an infection. The bird stumbled forward, using its talons of its one good leg to knock down the creatures before biting their heads. It lunged in a last attack, biting into the final beast. Its beak cracked into the creature just as the scorpion tail snapped up, striking it in the head. As the beast's blood flowed red upon the sand, the rock turned to stone. Lorlaam ran for where Evurn had landed and pulled him up to his feet. His head pounded from the impact, but he ran with his partner's lead from the site of the battle. Lorlaam laughed with a crazy tone. That is the craziest turn of events I have yet to see in all my many travels. The creatures killed one another. Not without your help, of course, but it is done. The desert realm around them faded away, not even requiring them to reach the location in which they had emerged from with the orb. They both exhaled in the cool air of the glacial seas that was much more refreshing than either of them even expected.
For that,
Lorlaam said.
I'll buy the drinks.
Evurn laughed. They're already free. Will not this place provide all we need anyway?
Ah, you are paying attention. Well, it is more like the actual thought in this case that actually matters.
Coming up to the area where the other two statues were, they admired that both the rock and several of the reptilian creatures, known as Vreklion, were now standing as trophies of their accomplishment.
Fun,
Lorlaam stated. Evurn shook his head with a slight laugh.
We must discuss the meaning of that word if we survive this place.
They reached the tavern, where they were met with the grand sight of a massive feast set before them. The woman of the tavern bowed as they entered.
"Good wizards,"
She began.
"the great god has blessed you with a feast. He knows your last trial was taxing upon you, but the great god promises that your next should not be at such a hot and barren place."
As Evurn and Lorlaam set out the table and Lorlaam poured them both some of the wine, Evurn shook his head.
So basically, what we know from our friend here is we will not be returning to the desert, but will probably be starving in some crystal palace where all we can do is stare at one another and then get devoured by a sleeping beast of some kind.
The Palace of Crystal, I would very much like that, actually. I am a blend of two ancient races, the Rusis from what you noticed before, and my other kin. The latter sort embedded much information into crystals. To find such a depository of knowledge as I would expect in an entire mountain of crystals would honestly be one of the greatest things for me. Secondary, of course, to the staff I'm already attempting to find.
Your people you speak of, what are they?
Dwemhar.
Truly, you are both Dwemhar and Rusis.
Truly, I am both. My father really loved a good Russian girl, but the Dwemhar side of me is why I had such foresight into your own journey to the Glacial Seas.
Evurn nodded.
I understand then.
But yes, I am a blend of two quite powerful bloodlines.
Evurn snickered.
Such a strange combination of blood, especially considering the long-standing rivalries between the two races. I'm surprised you were not killed.
So was I, to be honest. But I much like my life now. I have travelled many places, searching many forms of power. I wish to obtain this stuff of the god to channel my energies more effectively. It is supposedly made of a mix of stone from the great moon above, and the wood of a long-lost race of trees. It's quite a test for me to obtain it. This part of the journey is really the ending of many, many puzzles, not to mention quite a few strange mysteries before now.
He took a drink of his wine.
Thank you, even though I was not completely clear about whatever such trials would entail.
You're welcome. I do enjoy a good challenge from time to time, though I would actually like to be left alone after this.
There's time to be alone, but you should only truly enjoy that upon the passing of all that makes life worth living.
What would then justify that to you?
In truth, I do not know yet. But I have to guess if I had a child, that would become one of my main concerns of life. I would wish to hide her or him from most of this world. I feel that eventually the world will turn darker than even it is now.
Both became quiet for a while and enjoyed the food before them. The strange mix of exotic fruits, cold ocean fish, and even venison from the woods to the south was particularly interesting to Evurn. Where he was from, there were not so many varied dishes, and that was part of what made the eating of other races so appetizing. While elves tended to be sweeter than dwarves, dwarven meat did last longer. They had plenty of spices in the Shadowlands, but not much else unless you count what the vampires of their region considered tasty.
So, my friend, do you have any children?
Lorlaam asked. Evurn shrugged.
No. Shadow elves like myself do not tend to have children. Before you found me at the tavern, I decided to put aside my old ways and become a practitioner of simple potion making and magic. But I learned skills as all shadow elves do.
Blood rights killing, am I right?
For what is known as the shadow elves to most others, yes.
It seemed that Lorlaam wanted to smoke a bit of pipe grass following their meal. Evurn figured that out at the moment their large table vanished from before them, and a smaller table appeared with 2 pipes and a jar of tobacco. Evurn was not one for smoking, but considering his past few hours, he happily indulged to join Lorlaam outside.
I care little for smoking indoors when such a world is alive outside,
Lorlaam said as they exited the tavern. The sky was alight with the lights of Wura, or polar lights, as they were more commonly known outside the realm of Wura. Those who worshipped Wura believed that he rode upon the lights on his way to trick the other gods. Evurn believed differently. His people knew that there was an enveloping energy to their world, and that it was not likely not so fantastical as what many believed. But regardless, it was mystical, no doubt. Evurn packed the bowl of the pipe, and with the offer of a bit of flame from Lorlaam's staff, he puffed the tobacco to life and drew in the deep, rich flavor. He was surprised by its flavor. It was similar to what he had smoked in his homeland.
I would not think the gods to partake in tobacco from the southern swamps of my own land.
The gods do not,
Lorlaam said.
but this is exactly the kind of tobacco I wanted. I do enjoy that particular leaf.
You do realize it is grown in the feces of the crocodile.
I do, my friend. It has a unique earthiness.
Evurn smirked. He realized Lorlaam had called him friend multiple times, and standing here smoking with the odd wizard, he began to feel that the strange hybrid of races was at least an enjoyable companion for the time. As the polar lights above them danced with greens and reds as far as they could see, they finished their pipes and set them on a rock outside the tavern.
We should go in and get moving on to our next task. This should be number 2 of 3.
Oh, wonderful.
Evurn said. Upon entering the tavern, they noticed that the clothes they had arrived with appeared to have been laundered, and were now sitting on a barren table, waiting for them.
I assume this means this is what we need for our next bit of a task,
Lorlaam asked. The woman nodded and then turned around as if to give them a moment to change. As Evurn and Lorlaam again put on the warm clothes, Evurn noticed that while standing outside of the tavern and what would be considered a cold environment, he was not cold at all yet, before he swore he felt the temperature. It was another mystery of the place he was in. With them both dressed, the woman turned back around and now held 2 small seashells. One of them was yellow, the other one red. She led them over to where she had opened the other portals and took one shell, setting it on its back, followed by the second shell, putting it directly on top of the first one.
I will assume, then, that we are ready?
Yes,
They both said.
except,
Lorlaam said.
you said we. You mean you, as in us.
The woman smiled and then crushed both shells with her foot. She stepped back just as a swirling portal of water opened up on the floor. At first, the whirlpool was very small, no larger than a crab that would not have made good eating. As they stared, the whirlpool became larger, and they began to see fish circling in the pool itself. A few more moments passed, and the fish gave way to the appearance of actual waves, as if a small beach had appeared before them. Evurn and Lorlaam stepped forward, knee-deep in the ice-cold water. They felt themselves become extremely heavy, as if falling from a great height. Darkness swallowed them, and soon a frigid world greeted them. Chapter 4. Frigid Sea. Evurn opened his eyes to a familiar sight. Wherever they had gone, it was very much like the Glacial Seas. The sky was a pale blue, almost like it was glowing just beyond the dense clouds above them, creating a strange hue in the air. Before them was a simple but very rocky island. It was not large at all, and in fact, they could see the other side. There were no houses, no ships, and no obvious particular spots they were supposed to go toward, unlike the last place they had went. As Lorlaam and Evurn walked forward, they scanned their surroundings and kept their staves at the ready. While there were no actual buildings here, there were several large standing stones. They were very similar to the overall island itself. Across the surface of the island, the black stone center and the pebble beaches that surrounded it were covered in a thin layer of snow. No one had been here in some time, if ever. As they approached the grouping of large stones, they discovered tiny pools upon the top of each of them. The wind of the icy cold north gusted over the island. With no trees to cover them or rocks to take true cover behind, Evurn closed his robes around his body.
Damn cold here.
Evurn said.
Colder than the Glacial Seas, and that's saying something.
But Lorlaam was distracted, hovering his hand above the water on top of the large standing stones, when suddenly a small sprite appeared. It was tiny, like a fairy of the woodlands, but with a glowing white body with droplets of ice that flew off its wings as it flew around the frozen, harsh, icy environment. As Evurn moved near Lorlaam, more sprites materialized on top of the rocks. First, there were only 4, and then 8, and then at least 22 of the tiny sprites fluttered and zipped around them.
I don't really get our quest here,
Lorlaam said.
There are many of these sprites, but what is the point? I do not even see where we might go to obtain an orb.
I do not either,
Evurn said.
Perhaps that is not an option here. But then again, I see no monster either. The sprites are not beasts of any kind.
Evurn noticed that one of the stones did not have a small pool atop it, like the others. He took a grip on the top of the stone and pulled himself up to where he could get a better vantage point of their area. For the most part, he saw nothing except flat volcanic rock. There was no obvious tunnel or underground temple. At least at first glance, there was no clue to their path. It was then, from atop another standing stone nearby, an orb appeared. This one was a dark blue sphere, and from the vantage point Evurn had, it would be simple enough to obtain.
Now we're having some good luck,
Lorlaam said. Evurn was at a good position to jump and at least strike the orb with his staff. He did just that. As he landed, the orb struck the ground and went rolling a few paces away from them. They both laughed like two thieves getting away with a simple heist.
This will be the fastest yet,
Lorlaam said. Evurn stood, and Lorlaam went to the orb, reaching down to it. To their surprise, the many sprites shot up into the air, forming a strange wall above them. Lorlaam took the orb and rested his staff on the crux of his arm. As he held the orb, it began to shimmer and flash. Suddenly, hundreds of sprites appeared on the rocks, shooting up into the sky and twisting almost like a whirlpool as before.
We have the orb. Let's go,
Lorlaam said. They began the walk to where they had entered this realm, when suddenly the many hundreds of sprites above them swooped down, grabbing at their staves and tearing them away from their grasp. Evurn could do very little at that exact moment. His companion reached out with a single hand, sending a spell of ice, freezing several of the sprites. But it was pointless. In that short amount of time, both of their staves had been carried to a small rock, a good distance out at sea. Lorlaam dropped the orb.
You think a bit of ocean water will keep me from my staff?
He yelled to the sprites with a closed fist.
I am not so easily defeated.
Lorlaam went to the water's edge, reaching out with both hands. His fingertips glistened with ice as he released a spell, turning all the ocean from the edge of the island, going out to the staves into a thick, icy sheet. Evurn simply watched as the spell was cast, noticing that his friend was tiring from the constant spell casting. But thankfully, the ice reached the other island, just as his energy ran out. As his work was completed, Lorlaam fell to his knees, out of breath. He pointed out to where their staffs were.
Go get them. I must rest for a moment. That was surprisingly difficult.
Evurn tapped Lorlaam on the shoulder.
I'll be right back.
He began across the icy surface, making a careful note of how he walked. He did not want to slip and end up in the ocean itself, especially as he went further out. As he reached the halfway point across the ice, something emerged from the water before climbing up onto the rocks to the staves. It was a mermaid, or so she appeared. She lay out on the rocks before the staves, stroking her hips and legs and smiling at Evurn.
Come to me, come to my embrace. Come to the one you desire. I will relieve what is tense within you.
This was no mermaid, it was a siren. While Evurn prided himself on being able to resist the temptation of sexual guiles, the power of a siren was beyond simple appearance. Though it was a crafty creature, he hoped she would not notice him fumbling with potions in his robes. He was reaching for a particular potion he kept near the small of his back, something that would work well and give him just enough time, he hoped. He allowed himself to appear as if he was in a trance, walking slower and almost drunkenly toward her. Her eyes were glowing bright yellow, and as her words danced within his mind, he could tell her power was beginning to search his mind. Soon she would know he was bluffing. As Evurn drew nearly within arm's reach, she stopped singing and smiled.
Are you ready, my love?
He gripped the potion and smiled back.
Are you?
He swung his arm around, tossing the potion, shattering it onto the siren. Green flames engulfed her body, but as she stood up, the paralytic potency kicked in, and she simply rolled off the rocks and into the depths. Evurn grabbed the staves and turned to begin his hasty retreat back across the ice. But as he did, the ice exploded in a wall of water. In the eruption, a massive creature emerged from the watery depths. It had the body of a whale and the upper torso of the siren. As it cut into the water, swimming out and away from the island, the rest of the siren vanished, and a creature known as a narwhal appeared in its place. Evurn had seen a narwhal before, but this beast was at least 4 times the size of what he had witnessed. Along its body were glowing runes that ran from the corner of its mouth to its tail. The creature turned and seemed to be hurling itself toward them. He did not know narwhals to be as aggressive as this beast, but then again, this was not a simple narwhal. Lorlaam chugged a health elixir and stood up, searching around for where the creature had went. Evurn realized that now he was cut off from the other island. At least he had his staff. Not knowing if the spell would work, he used his own staff to create a vine upon the shattered ice in the ocean before him. Though the vine erupted from the ice, its leafy structure quickly froze. He gripped Lorlaam's staff and attempted to use it to craft ice, but the spell simply faltered and dissipated. Lorlaam was now on the edge of the broken ice, casting his spells into the ocean and working to extend the ice bridge back to Evurn.
Bring me my stuff. It is no mere magic staff, like you may know. You cannot use it.
Evurn went as far down the icy broken bridges he could and heaved the staff to Lorlaam. It struck headfirst into the ice and bounced back up onto the island. Lorlaam ran to get it, just as the narwhal destroyed the section of ice Lorlaam has just created that was almost to where Evurn was. As of right now, Lorlaam and Evurn were still separated. Evurn wasn't sure what was going to happen. If he was working with his own kind and this ever happened, he would be abandoned for the greater good of the completion of a quest. In this case, it did not seem that Lorlaam would abandon him, and frankly, he was surprised. Upon retrieving his staff, Lorlaam returned to the water's edge, casting an electrifying bolt into the ocean just as the narwhal breached again. The ball of electricity caught on to the narwhal, twisting the creature in the water. Evurn took that moment with his own staff, firing an earth spell into the creature's back. The magic twisted in the water before an eruption of vines entangled the beast. Lorlaam attempted to send another bolt into it, but the narwhal managed to get out of range of Lorlaam's spell and dove under the ocean. Evurn watched the waters around him, wondering where it would emerge next. By now, it had broken out of the entanglement he had placed on it. He looked at what potions remained in his belt, seeing a fairly potent poison. The only problem was this particular potion did not work in water.
We must get this beast on the land.
Evurn shouted, moving his hand over the crystal tip of his staff as it began turning red as he prepared to cast a spell of his people. It was considered a forbidden art by many of his own. Blood magic. It was not a skill he embraced, nor one that a typical shadow elf like himself would normally use. But he needed to try something. The veins of his arms suddenly glowed as his fingertips expelled the blood into the water. This magic was powerful, but he doubted he could hold it long enough to actually kill the creature. He also hated to do it, for it sapped him of energy much more than he cared to admit. The end of the staff flickered with fire before an expanding aura of red turned the water into a bubbling, chaotic shroud of energy as he struck the narwhal with the blood magic. The creature was blasted back and up out of the water, and in the immediate area the ice melted. He held the creature with his spell, but he was weakened with every second. He was done, and the frigid water surrounded him. Evurn pushed himself back up to the surface and climbed onto the island where once again he was alone. He was shivering uncontrollably, and he was much further than just out of breath. He could barely push himself up, and his vision was foggy. He could see Lorlaam across the water releasing multiple spells toward the creature, and soon the creature disappeared back beneath the surface of the water. This was not exactly what he planned for when he forced the creature up onto land. He was too weak to get up as quickly as he needed, and now he had missed his chance. The creature itself was done with him. Through blurred vision, he could see the narwhal roll onto the beach itself and was quickly changing back to the form of a siren. He felt a swift kick to his side, and he flew to nearly the other side of the rocky little island. He focused, concentrating his breathing as the devilish creature drew a dagger from behind her back, coming directly upon him. He blindly grabbed for his potion, breaking it on the rock behind him and slinging the fluid onto the siren. The creature squelched in pain, falling to her knees as the acidic poison sapped her of her life force. He felt a sudden pain in the lower portion of his hand where he had broken the vial. The substance had gotten on his own skin. As he began trying to fumble through many potions, they were suddenly taken back to the realm where the tavern was.
That worked out well.
He heard Lorlaam say. Evurn's vision was clearing, but now, looking at his hand, he knew the poison was still on him.
Quickly, help me find a vial.
He said out of breath as the poison began to take him.
It's bright. Blue.
Lorlaam knelt and began trying to go through the many potions Evurn had, eventually finding the potion he sought.
Here, take it,
Lorlaam said. Evurn opened the vial and dumped it in his hand. The burning subsided, and he was able to breathe again without too much struggle. The vial, however, was empty.
You okay?
Lorlaam asked.
I am, thank you. Be happy. Most shadow elves would rather die than allow someone else to touch anything they own.
Good thing you are not like other shadow elves.
Lorlaam laughed.
You'd be dead.
As Lorlaam helped him to his feet, secondary regret using the potion struck. Though it had saved his life, it was a rather rare and powerful potion. While he contemplated the value of life and his use of the potion, though, he realized it was foolish in regard to personal survival. He glanced up at the twilight sky above them and sighed. As they drew close to the tavern, they came to the gallery of statues. They saw a single image of the siren now joining the creatures, already there, in a sparkling show of lights from above that went dark as it formed the stone of the statue.
The sprites themselves were not our enemy this time, unlike the creatures in the desert realm.
Yes, though we did kill a few of those too,
Evurn said.
I am okay with only one creature at a time. Multiple pets of Wara inhabiting a single area are not the easiest to defeat.
As they entered the tavern, the woman met them with a large kettle of water and 2 mugs of tea. She set the kettle down and then smiled at them.
You have completed 2 of the 3 tests. You are almost done and to your goal. but I do like having you in this world. I normally have no one here.
I will be honest,
Lorlaam said.
I had thought you simply the embodiment of the god himself.
I can see why you would think that, but it is not so. I am no god. In truth, I don't even know what I am anymore. Since you are both already privy to certain secrets of the gods, I will tell you that I am not going anywhere. I do not fear there's any harm in telling you a bit more about myself. I angered the gods. It was the trickster god in particular. I angered Wura. At one time in the history of the lands, the gods walked among us peoples of the living realm. It was the night of a grand party in celebration of the alignment of certain constellations in the skies. I made a joke. I compared him to one of the other gods, the ones I know now to be of the Itsu. I will say that back then, there was not the same division as there is now. But as petty as it sounds, I angered him.
The trickster god cannot take a joke from someone else,
Evurn asked.
Evidently not. It doesn't matter now. You're not the first to come to this place, and when your time is complete, I will then float endlessly to the vacuum of his realm. Do not feel sorrow for me, only know that when you tempt the gods in any way, most of the time, the gods will win.
The woman suddenly had a very somber look in her eyes as she turned away from them, and without saying another word, she left the room itself. It seemed that right now the woman realized that very soon, indeed, she would be alone again.
What a tale.
Lorlaam said. Evurn nodded.
Yes, I thought she was as you thought, but she's a prisoner.
Lorlaam slurped his tea.
We are all prisoners in some form. Maybe prisoners to the bottle, to killing, or to making coins to maintain our riches. We are all prisoners nonetheless, but we have the freedom to choose our enslavement. Where this woman is, this is her fate. In time, we must all embrace the fate that we make for ourselves.
Evurn agreed with Lorlaam's assessment. As potentially bleak as it was, he knew it to be true. They slurped their tea and, upon finishing it, stood up. The woman returned from the back room, her face red. It was clear she was upset, but instead of asking if they were ready or if they needed anything, she simply reached out her hands upon the table. From nothing appeared ropes and climbing equipment. As Evurn and Lorlaam took the supplies given to them, the woman pointed over to the area Evurn had originally been most enticed by. It was the potion-making equipment.
I do suggest you restore your stock. You'll find all you need to make anything you possibly want, and you may take it from this realm if you complete your task.
Lorlaam shrugged as Evurn went over to the alchemical supplies. Indeed, there were many rare and strange ingredients here. Most he'd read of in books or, by chance, found samples exploring a dark corner of the world, but never had he seen so much gathered together like this. He quickly went to work, grinding up different materials, from speckled mushrooms to the root of crock bushes. It was a rarer use of his knowledge, but finding a few fire flowers that he could mix with the hallucinogenic compound known as spirit salt would make a very nasty surprise for a sudden attacker. Besides, he had always liked fire flowers and their strange crystal petals. Evurn suddenly felt much younger, returning to his old ways, and by some form of arcane power, he was able to heat the water relatively quickly, using the equipment provided to him that was of a rather strange design. It was old, perhaps Dwemhar, but he did not know for sure. Making several different brews at once, some requiring steeping while others simply bottled hot, he soon had an entire supply of differing potions.
You did this relatively quickly,
Lorlaam said.
What do you have?
Potions for healing, killing, paralyzing, and banishing. I have a few more that surmount needs beyond this realm, but I was able to replace what I had to use in our last test.
Evurn smiled. About that time, the woman, who had her eyes closed, began lifting her hands slowly up and down.
It is time, and you will not return to this place one way or another.
There was no question of shell arrangements or a strange disk this time. Instead, the very floor of the tavern began to open up, and beneath it was a starry field unlike anything Evurn had ever seen. As the walls of the tavern faded away, and all they could see in all directions was endless stars, Lorlaam and Evurn looked one last time at the woman as she began to fade away. Her eyes became as the stars around them, and her body became no more. Lorlaam and Evurn jumped into the starry portal shimmering before them, and blackness overtook their sight. They emerged and immediately clung to the rocks behind them. They looked below them and saw nothing but stars as far as they could see. Looking up, they saw the same, except directly behind them, where they clung to a sheer cliff. Chapter 5. Starry Paths. If there was something beyond potion-making and general killing that Evurn could consider himself an above-average specialist in, it was climbing. Taking the rope from Lorlaam, who was literally trembling, he tied a notch around his waist and immediately began free climbing up the side of the rock.
I will make our way up to the next level. Once there, I will secure the rope for you to climb up next.
Evurn did just that. The cliff itself was an easy enough climb for someone of skill, and without such skill, this would likely be the last part of the journey for anyone else, including Lorlaam. Evurn made it to another flat level, reaching to his climbing belt and driving a spike into the rock. After securing the rope and locking it with a clamp, he signaled for Lorlaam to join him. His companion was not the best at climbing, but at least he was making progress, though it was the slowest Evurn had ever seen. Lorlaam reached where Evurn was.
You've never had to climb, wizard.
Not in a pinch. Not like this,
Lorlaam said, out of breath. Evurn quickly began to climb up again. It was then that the winds around them shifted. They could hear something moving up on the rocks, but neither of them could actually see beyond just a few feet. A deep mist wrapped around the sheer cliffs. Thunder rolled, and the rocky face they clung to quaked. Evurn looked to his left, catching something in the corner of his eye. It was then he saw the stone form of a massive monstrosity beneath them. It was difficult to tell in the shifting clouds shrouding the creature what exactly it was beneath them, but its form eclipsed the empty expanse beneath them. This titan was clinging to the mountain as well, but upon its head was lightning that swirled like a crown that leaped up every few moments, striking the cliffs. Lorlaam outstretched his staff. A glowing blue aura surged around the wizard, followed by an explosion of expanding white waves as he sent a spell directly to the titan. The titan brought up his hand, absorbing the blast but shattering part of its rocky fingers. It then slapped at the cliff face, taking off chunks of rocks and further destabilizing the cliff that Evurn clung to. The shadow elf pushed himself to the top of the cliff and looked back down to Lorlaam.
Come now, I will distract the creature.
Evurn took one of his potions and popped the top. He had not had the ingredients for this particular magic in some time, but this was the perfect answer to their quandary. He poured the substance into the air, creating a sudden firebird, a phoenix but not of flesh and blood. This was a conjuring of utmost skill, and it swooped down upon the rocky beast, searing its face with an elemental fury. Evurn then grabbed his staff with both hands and pointed down at the creature, focusing a single energy blast at its wrist. What sounded like glass shattering followed a few moments later as Evurn's magic cracked the titan's hand and caused the creature to lose its grip. The creature roared as it slid off the rock and far down the cliffside and beneath the low, clinging clouds. This was Lorlaam's chance. Lorlaam turned his attention to climbing up to the final leg of his climb. There was another roar that reverberated through the cliffs as the creature was once again upon the cliff face, clawing its way up. Just as it grabbed Lorlaam's leg, the wizard turned, jumping up on the creature and shoving his staff into its head.
Be from your waking life, beast.
This time, the blast completely shattered the creature's head. Lorlaam turned and jumped from the creature, grasping Evurn's hand at the last moment as, in a final roar, the creature fell into the abyss to not return again. Evurn pulled Lorlaam up from the cliff. They both worked to catch their breath.
Damn.
Lorlaam said. Evurn turned to find the wizard staring at his staff. Lorlaam was paying particular attention to the crystal at the end.
What is it? What is wrong?
He asked him.
My staff is useless to me now. I knew it was risky attempting to jump on the beast, but it seems that in a weird twist of fate, I lost the staff that I have had nearly all of my lifetime while trying to gain another staff from a god.
He opened his hand and a ball of fire appeared from nowhere.
At least I still have control of my birth powers.
He closed his hand and extinguished the fire, and they both turned to look upon a field of dark green grass. All around them was a starry void, but strangely there was a massive white moon rising in the distance.
I have heard that the realm of the god is an endless, starry expanse. We must be upon his doorstep.
As they began across the field, they noticed unicorns running across the blank canvas of the land. Aside from the tall grasses and a strange presence of wind, there were no trees here, no mountains, only the stars, the moon, and the unicorns upon the field. With no real understanding of where they were or where to go, they simply walked across the field. Their previous ventures had taught them that nothing was as it seemed, and as they would soon discover, that was a very true statement. They reached what appeared to be the center of the massive green pastures. It was here upon the ground, embedded into the green grass. They found a glowing stone. They both knelt at the stone when they suddenly heard a voice.
2 have come to claim the prize of 1. 2 have completed the tests to a point that you both stand upon the green fields before my realm. My herd shall offer their own tests soon, but know that I have seen both your souls. It is a gift from the great poet to those of us who watch from afar. I question. You befriended the woman within the tavern, and now you think you know the will of a god?
Evurn and Lorlaam looked at one another, unsure how to answer the question. A few more seconds passed, and Lorlaam answered,
No, we are servants of the land, and we do not know the workings of the gods.
There were a few more moments of silence, and Evurn and Lorlaam looked at one another, cautious of saying anything else.
Well, I am a trickster, and I have never tried to become anything but.
What in the realm does that mean?
Lorlaam asked. The stone suddenly flashed, blinding them for a moment. Once Evurn's vision cleared, he realized he was on his back. There was a rumbling beneath him. He looked up to see unicorns in the far distance, but there was something strange about the rapidly approaching herd. His vision was blurry, but it seemed the unicorns themselves were levitating above the swaying grass of the field.
These are not unicorns,
he heard Lorlaam shout. Evurn covered his eyes as Lorlaam shot a blast of fire brighter than any he had done yet. Evurn struggled to stand, but he felt a dark presence upon him, something beyond unholy that sapped him of energy. He could see a blackness upon the stampeding herd. They might have looked like unicorns, but these were indeed a trick. Lorlaam ripped him to his feet and held him up.
On your feet. Our path forward is open.
Evurn was standing and holding the staff, but he felt as if he'd drunk too much wine. He looked around to the sight of charred and smoldering beasts of some kind. They were not unicorns, but had taken the form of a purer creature indeed. It mattered little what they actually were, for now the herd was circling and preparing to trample them. Looking beyond where they were, Evurn saw their path that was absolutely not there before. There was a single stairwell of silver rising into the sky and appearing to go to the moon itself. They both ran for the stairwell, though it would have appeared to anyone observing them that they were barely moving at all. The faster they ran, the more sluggish their legs felt. Evurn and Lorlaam glanced back to see the monstrous creatures transforming out of the unicorns. It seemed as if they were stuck in a strange dream, or more appropriately, a nightmare. Evurn knew much of meditation and had spent many hours doing just that. He had moved and viewed places where he was not standing while in a meditative state, and it was that focus he took now. He concentrated, attempting to see beyond the stairwell they were headed to, and at once he was moving faster than even his feet would have taken him. He thought of Lorlaam, and his mind gripped his arm. Through some form of power or energy, it worked. Both he and Lorlaam were upon the stairwell, and the nightmarish creatures below them could not reach them now. They ascended, running as quickly as they could, and it seemed the stars in the sky were moving and shifting. Evurn could not easily describe what he felt this moment, but it was a mix of elation and sadness and fury and fear all combined as one overwhelming emotion. As they came to the top of the stairwell, staring upon what appeared to be simply a glowing white portal, they touched it with their hands, as they hoped they would be moved from this realm. Instead, the white portal turned the color of sapphire before revealing a passageway with glowing crystal torches.
Now this is a strange place,
Lorlaam said.
It is like we ascended to the moon in some type of dream state. I'm not really sure what to make of this.
Evurn snickered.
After everything we've seen, you're actually surprised where we are now.
A bit. Yes. A bit.
Unlike the many other caves and places they had been, they did not need an additional source of light in whatever this place was. They began down the hallway and felt the floor shaking beneath them. A scraping sound soon followed the shaking, and Evurn turned around and found that the way they had come was now completely sealed. They would continue through this labyrinth and either succeed or die. Going deeper into what they both decided to deem the Moon Temple, they came to where the passage opened to a large square room. As Evurn went to walk into the room, a trap sprung along the wall. There was a rush of wind followed by a single blade cutting across the passageway. Lorlaam pulled him out of its path just in time.
Trap's great,
Evurn said. The trap seemed to be on its own timer. There were other traps too, and while they did activate upon their presence, they retracted back at a slower pace, allowing a sliver of time for them to advance further. The trick was seeing them before they serrated through them.
We need to be mindful. While it's a rather simple trap, we don't know what else might be hidden in this place.
Crossing across the large room, they came to a set of doors. One seemed to have a massive scratch mark embedded with gold. Though Evurn tried to open the door, it would not open. Looking around, they did not see a switch or lever to unlock it, but there were two other doors on either side of this main one. The one on the left was made from a blue type of wood, while the one on the right was a red-colored wood. As Evurn and Lorlaam both went to the blue wooden door, they found they could not open it. As Evurn continued to try to find some way to force open the door, Lorlaam went to the other door. Upon their separation, miraculously, the doors now opened. Evurn went to walk towards Lorlaam, and both doors shut again.
It seems we must both proceed with our own passageway,
Evurn told him. Lorlaam nodded. As Evurn went back to the other door, he gripped his staff and carefully looked into the passage ahead. He could not see anything but shadows. Looking back at Lorlaam, he noticed that the wizard used his birth power, summoning fire in his hands as he moved past the void. The passageway ahead was dark. Evurn stepped forward, casting a ball of light against the opposite side of the room to see what was ahead. When he reached the halfway point in the long, barren room, There was a slam above him. The air snapped from cool to hot, and at once he knew he was not alone. He heard a scratching sound like bone upon metal that forced him to clench his teeth. As he glanced up, he saw two blue eyes glowing in the darkness. He felt a rush of air that had such force, he had to pull himself toward one of the walls. Whatever was above him was inhaling. He knew what was to come next and ran as quickly as he could toward the corner of the room. Throwing up his staff, he created a protective ward as a blast of fire engulfed the passage. He looked up, spotting a flash of the beast. It leaped across the ceiling and clawed its way over the passageway. A metal cage was above him, and it seemed that the creature could not descend past it. The creature then moved toward the other side. Evurn saw several flashes of fire and then ice. The creature was struck, but now it seemed there were multiple blue eyes moving in the shadows above. He assumed Lorlaam had struck the creature somehow and caused it to recoil, but now the many heads sent another volley of fireballs into Lorlaam's cage. The wizard responded with a crackling electrical burst that lit up the entire room. Evurn had to push forward. He did not cast his light from his staff anymore. Instead, he finally felt the edge of the doorway, but noticed it was locked. He felt along the gateway and couldn't feel a handle lock to twist. Lorlaam's casting continued. It was then that Evurn spotted a small crystal lever just to the right of the gateway from the flashes of Lorlaam's magic. He gripped the crystal tip and pulled the lever upward. The passage opened. He stepped forward into the next hall and noticed that he was on a long bridge surrounded by stars. He looked back to see nothing but blackness, as if where he had just come from was not even there. He crept forward, watching carefully at the edges of the pathway, expecting another attack from the beast. He could imagine being pulled into the abyss to either side, but this wasn't like the room he was just in. There was a ringing sound in the air, and just that alone was near disorienting. Soon thereafter, he noticed there was another bridge, and that his friend had made it through.
What was that?
Lorlaam shouted.
Something I care not to meet again.
Evurn shouted back.
It's like it was toying with us.
Indeed, this is quite a game for wizards.
At first, they were careful. It seemed their pathway was straight, although they were still apart. Across the long chasm of strange, starry surroundings, they went straight toward a purely white temple. It was a jagged tower suspended in the air that looked almost as if it was made of ice. As Evurn and Lorlaam met again, now standing at the atrium of the strange temple, they looked back at the pathways and noticed they had vanished. Now only stars surrounded them in all directions. Evurn made a circle, looking at their surroundings. There was a single stairwell before them. Looking further up, he saw a large doorway with the same image of a claw mark inlaid with gold that he had spotted at the doorway before him, and Lorlaam were split apart.
I take it surviving the dragon was a test?
Evurn asked.
I guess so,
Lorlaam said.
I am quite fine when not actually dealing with a creature such as that. I read stories of the multi-headed dragon. That indeed was what that was. I've heard you can actually find those in the Shadowlands.
I've never seen such a big beast, but then again, I have not gone looking for tracks. I tend to leave the killing of dragons to dragon slayers, and those types I have very little affiliation with. Too much armor, in my opinion.
It felt good to both of them to finally be near what they felt was the end of their adventure. Though as admittedly bittersweet as it was, Evurn wanted very much to get back to doing as very little as possible. He had no intent to go on any more adventures once he returned to the Glacial Seas.
Let's retrieve the earned reward,
Lorlaam said. They began up the stairwell when they were surprised by the sudden appearance of the woman from the tavern materializing on the steps above. They noticed she was smiling.
I am sorry for my story before. I look at it now as a small bit of dishonesty, a small lie in the grand scheme of what is the world. No, I have not kept a person prisoner within my realm. I just choose to take a disguise, for this woman is quite beautiful in my eyes. Unfortunately, it is forbidden to take a bride of the living realm. But her story was mostly true. She made me laugh, and that is a dearest gift to the trickster god.
So she didn't anger a god. You choose to instead take this disguise and make us feel bad for you.
Evurn asked. Lorlaam stared at Evurn and then looked back to Wura. Evurn did not break his stare. The image of the woman faded away, and they saw Wura's typical representation of the polar lights moving in the air before them.
You are correct, Shadow Elf. There is little pity toward the gods, and every day more forget us. But there is much to happen upon the many realms we live. We must embrace what we enjoy while there is still time. I am a trickster, after all. I want to say that you've done well, Lorlaam.
The light said, moving closer to where the wizard stood.
You both have worked very hard to reach your goal, yet beyond the door above is the final test. Many have fallen before now, and my poor creature, he is very lonely. I found this creature when I was younger, and though I give him all I can within his home, he has nothing to play with, as a child might say. I will tell you that I used a power that you do not have to subdue him. Then, I was full of life. I could throw my power like a flying sword to quickly defeat the creature, but alas, the ease will not be what I had. Proceed, my brave wizards. Embrace your final challenge. Know that I claim this creature from a region that at one time had 1,000 lakes, a dream of a dream for some. You may think you know the direct path of your lives, but the great poet is the true author behind us all.
The appearance of the polar lights fled, leaving just the stairwell leading up to the final door. Neither Evurn nor Lorlaam said anything else, and quickly proceeded up the doorway. It opened as they arrived, and they passed through the entryway of pure white light. They were now on a frozen, ice-covered tundra. Majestic mountains circled around them, and a pine forest formed the base of the mountains, forming a circle of trees in every direction. Even so, the howls of the gusting wind tore through them as they began their way down the ice-stone road.
Well, this looks strangely familiar,
Lorlaam said.
I see places like this near the north, or the region called north of the southern lands.
Evurn glanced around, surprised that their surroundings were so mundane compared to the previous places they had been. Surveying the horizon, he spotted a small cottage down the road, with no other structures or signs of life other than a single light in the window.
We should go there,
Evurn suggested. They proceeded with careful haste, watching their surroundings, making a direct path to the cottage. It was a simple dwelling. There were no windows and only a single door with a small porch. The thatch roof was heavy with snowfall, and icicles hung off the wooden overhang that would not have been big enough for more than a single person. Lorlaam went around the side of the house, checking for any other signs of tampering or magical traps. He then went to the door and gave a firm knock twice. Silence. No one responded. They also did not hear anyone stirring around inside, though they smelled the residue of smoke from a fire. Evurn knocked again. There was no answer. He pushed open the door and lowered his staff as he quickly scanned the room. It was empty. Empty of life, at least. Within a small shack were the embers of a cooking fire. There was a small table with the residue of half-eaten food, and a bed that was unmade but had been used lately. As they moved around the door and found a shelf, they saw a single book open to a peculiar page. Evurn picked up the book and noticed a recipe for a poison. It was a rare poison, but it would be simple to find the needed ingredients in a place like this. As he went to explore further, he nearly tripped over something and immediately saw a leg sticking out from beneath the table. A body lay on its side, nearly invisible in the dark room. Evurn checked him for life, but he was well dead and cold.
Suicide? Or did someone kill him? Or something?
Lorlaam asked. Evurn went to the pot and scraped off the residue on his finger. He sniffed and quickly recoiled back from the stench and wiped the residue on the table.
Poison. Yes, but why would a man within this realm kill himself? It doesn't really make too much sense. All the realms we have been haunted by some form of creature or person acting like some entity. No one has committed suicide such as this.
They continued to observe the room, making a point to look outside every few moments. Lorlaam came upon a note hatefully written and posted to the backside of the door.
I have been here long enough. I have served as he wished. I cannot continue the cycle of life and death, being hunted every day by the monstrous beast. Many times I have chopped off its head, and he returns. It is too much. Let the gods curse me to the hells of the afterlife. I would rather that than remain in this place. The god came to me. He told me others were coming and claimed it was a good chance for my release. He always claimed things, like that I was not his prisoner, but always felt that way. It doesn't matter. This is why you do not barter with the gods, for you always receive something as you quite did not expect it. I will never get what I was promised. If any do reach my body, leave it. You have enough to worry about. Mage of the woods.
This man was a mage,
Lorlaam asked.
So it says. But how do we know this is not another one of the god's tricks? You mentioned it before, and it is his pastime.
He dropped the note and took his staff in both hands.
This is a distraction. Let's go outside and face whatever needs to be faced. Then we'll be done with this game of his, and I'll happily have my staff.
Lorlaam went outside, and Evurn slowly followed behind. Outside, a pale white sun pierced through the grey clouds. There was warmth in the air, but with a gust from the icy mountain reaches, that warmth was chased away. They began away from the strange abandoned house, and the more Evurn looked around, the more he realized they were in a circular prison. This was no valley, but only gave off the appearance of a valley. The encircling mountains around them were tall and unforgiving. Whatever they were to face, they would face here upon a plateau of tundra. The stalwart stance that Lorlaam had taken before relaxed away to a simple slogging walk, and then almost careless glances from side to side.
We have been at this for quite a bit. There is no beast appearing. There's been nothing but that damn cottage and a random note. Perhaps there's something we were supposed to actually do that we missed. Some clue, you know?
Perhaps,
Evurn replied.
Or perhaps his trickster god has finally tricked us the last time. Perhaps it all was nothing more than imprisonment. The mage here before claimed he was killed over and was seeking the same thing you sought. How do we know this is not a mere trick?
Suddenly a voice spoke out over the winds.
This is no trick, my wizards. The man before you could not defeat what you must, and he had spent a lifetime. But he is not as wise as you two, not as strong, and he was alone. You cannot defeat what you must face by force alone. I offer you what I offered him, a single thread of advice. There is no fire that will burn beyond the house. Use that as you may, for I tell you, you may not find all your spells working as they should.
Evurn and Lorlaam looked at one another before Evurn pointed his staff and cast a spell to the ground. His earth magic was working fine. A large vine grew and began to spin up into the air.
It seems to work,
Lorlaam said. Lorlaam reached out and sent a spike of ice screaming through the air. The spell worked. Using his other hand, his fingertips flashed orange and summoned flame within his hand, but then it went out. He attempted again, but nothing happened. Evurn knew a little fire magic and attempted to cast a low-level spell. His staff sparked, but then nothing.
So it seems we cannot use fire magic.
Evurn pointed out.
Wonderful man. We are in an icy place, likely to find an icy beast, and we cannot use the one thing that can defeat it. Why did he even mention fire at the house? To let us know we have somewhere warm to sit between deaths?
Before his question could even be pondered, the trees in the distance began to part, and the screams of several creatures vibrated off the mountains around them. They would not have long before they knew exactly what it was they faced. Bursting through trees and charging directly at them was a creature of the strangest kind. It was icy as expected, but dark green with 3 massive heads. This dragon, if it could be called that, barreled toward them upright on 2 clawed feet, and it was not a blanket of spraying fire that poured from its mouth, but shrieks of flaming rocks that sprayed from its gaping maws in a barrage upon the wizards. Evurn and Lorlaam barely recoiled behind their enveloping wards as the dragon's attack struck. Their wards flashed and shattered, sending flames up around them. They split, running in opposite directions, both thinking and hoping that the creature did not directly follow them. For now, Evurn was lucky. As the creature followed Lorlaam in the direction they had come from before, Evurn was left to think about what he might do. The creature had its back turned, and while good sense told Evurn to hide in the trees or to devise a better way to deal with their new problem, he ran forward, taking advantage of his location behind the beast. Sprinting across the tundra, he pointed his staff, firing his earth magic to the creature. As a vine twisted up to grab its legs, 2 of its heads turned as if like an owl, shooting balls of fire his way. He angled his staff downward, attempting to cast a vine growth spell to propel himself above the creature. But the creature lunged back his way, charging him and cutting into the vine, knocking Evurn to the ground. Evurn drew his small dagger, normally not used for combat, and as the creature snapped toward him, he grasped the side of its one head, stabbing it repeatedly where several of Lorlaam's attacks had already done damage. It recoiled back, ripping the dagger from Evurn's hand as its head bled profusely. Evurn gripped his staff and pointed directly at the bleeding head, before sending a blast of wind with some hope of severing it. It worked. The few tendons and muscles that connected the head were torn off, and the 2 remaining heads wailed in pain. Evurn pointed his staff down at the ground, casting multiple entanglement spells, hoping to snare the creature so they could work on each head one at a time. The vines twisted around its claws, up its legs, and around its short, stubby arms. The creature was pulled down to the ground, and now Evurn and Lorlaam took this opportunity to quickly destroy the creature. They both used their powers to the extent they had mastered. It was either them or this creature, and as the tundra between the mountains flashed from the explosions of their potent powers, they had no doubt that Wura was likely watching them from above. Evurn held his staff at the head closest to him, sending it into a complete erratic frenzy as his blood magic surged from his veins to his staff and into the creature's skull. It twisted and buckled as a spell tore the tissue apart from the inside. Lorlaam, too, was casting a strong spell. His hands had turned frosty blue as he sent waves upon waves of ice, encasing another head. As blood poured from the creature's body at random, the other head Evurn was attacking began to shrivel and fall off. The creature began to shake violently as Lorlaam focused his magic into the creature, before beginning to stomp his neck, attempting to break off the nearly frozen skull.
Damn you, beast!
Lorlaam continued to kick as Evurn turned to striking the creature with his staff in the chest, each smite causing the creature to shake even more violently. Soon the 3rd head was done and broke like shattering glass on a rock. Both Evurn and Lorlaam recoiled back. The 2 wizards were out of breath, and furthermore, Evurn was especially tired considering his blood magic. He felt something trickling from his nose and realized he was bleeding.
It is done,
Evurn said.
We've defeated the beast, and I will be surprised if there's some other creature to deal with here.
Lorlaam said nothing, panting as he walked over to the creature. He kicked it and turned around.
Come on, Evurn. Let's go back to where we entered into this realm and see if perhaps there is a portal that has opened.
Evurn was happy to be done with the beast. At last he could return to the Glacial Seas as he wanted and be done with this crazy quest with Lorlaam. But as they walked away, they heard stirring behind them. Lorlaam did not realize it at first, but Evurn did. He turned to see their defeated nemesis standing once again. The original head they had taken off had returned, and the other two heads were surrounded by a glowing yellow light. The creature was healing itself. As the lone head opened its gaping maw, fire exploded from its jaws, and a blast struck all around them, with Evurn having little time to warn his fellow wizard. Evurn deflected some of the attack in a partial ward, but Lorlaam was thrown to the ground. He tore off his robe that had caught fire and jumped beside Evurn. They focused their wards together as another blast tore through them. Though not as accurate as the original attack, it seemed the creature would not be so easily defeated.
What is this thing?
Lorlaam shouted.
Is this some undead beast? A monster of the Itsu? It doesn't matter.
He growled.
I'm done!
Lorlaam ran forward, and in one hand he summoned ice, while with his other he simply reached out as if attempting to grab the beast, and one of the heads appeared as if suddenly grappled. There was an explosion of magic, unwitnessed yet by Evurn, as Lorlaam tore into the creature, casting his spells of ice, lightning, and using a strange power Evurn knew as the spirit magics of the Dwemhar. The beast and the wizard were wrapped in a tumultuous fight. Lorlaam managed to tear off one head and immediately went to the next, but it seemed the heads were going back faster now. Evurn thought of all the creatures he had studied in many years of wandering the Ashlands. He thought back to the wars while within the schools of the Shadow Elves, and more importantly for this very moment, he thought back to old stories and what it possibly was they faced. What beast of the gods could be before them that could not be defeated as any other beast? Then he remembered an old tale of a dragon slayer, and a dragon that tormented many villages once in the primordial days of men. That dragon required either fire to burn the spot of the severed head, or for the severed head to be choked with ash, so that the dragon's heart could not restore the severed part. They were given the tools to defeat this creature from the very beginning, and it seemed that without his presence, not even the powerful Lorlaam would have thought of something as simple, relatively speaking, to defeat the beast.
I shall return,
Evurn shouted, but it was doubtful Lorlaam had even heard him. The explosions of magic had grown so bright that the sun began to fade in comparison. It was difficult to even see Lorlaam now. Evurn made it back to the cottage and went to the ashes of the fire. Though they looked still to be red-hot, the ashes themselves were enhanced. This was no normal fire, but more like the salts created from destroying the fire creatures of his lands. It was strange to him to see the answer so clearly before him. He gathered as much of the ashes as he could in a pouch and hurried back outside. The creature had grown in size many times and was towering well above Lorlaam. It would be more difficult now as the heads had grown longer, their massive necks towering above. Lorlaam had somehow taken to the air to fight his foe, using his Dwemhar powers to pull large boulders from the earth and strike the creature's body. The creature began to run on all fours, moving away from Lorlaam.
That's right, run!
As Lorlaam floated down to the lower level, nearly touching the ground, the massive dragon fired another volley of his fiery rocks, turning the ground beneath Lorlaam to molten lava. The ground began to hiss with the burn and steam as long-frozen permafrost quickly evaporated, sending steam up into the air. Evurn ran back to where they had fought before. He searched the seared ground to find his dagger. He figured he'd have to remove a head himself to show his companion how to defeat the creature. He also hoped his plan would work, because frankly he had no idea. Things could not get any worse at this point. Lorlaam had already returned to his fight with the creature, but with each passing moment his spells were becoming weaker and his accuracy was faltering. Evurn found his dagger and checked the blade. The creature had not hurt it in any way, and it was still sharp. But as he looked at it further, he noticed the hilt itself was broken.
"It'll do,"
he said. Lorlaam flew almost directly at the creature. He grabbed one of the horns and rode the neck like a horse, sending a curling bolt of electricity into its eye. The other eye exploded, and the head fell down just as another neck grew immediately out and began snapping at him.
"You must use ash. It's the only way to kill him,"
Evurn shouted out, but Lorlaam was not paying any attention. The wizard had blood rage. He attempted to do every manner of spell available to his vast knowledge of sparks and ice and fumes of poisonous gases. This creature simply could not be defeated. Evurn sprinted, running behind the creature itself. With some act of fate, it had worked out that some of the ground was not completely molten yet. Large black rocks of already cooled lava had formed, likely by some inaccuracy or Lorlaam's casting of ice. The heads were not looking at Evurn, and it seemed now, with so many attempts to kill it, the creature itself had evolved. Though instead of simple green skin, it had hardened dragon hide, especially around the center head itself. This would prove to be the bane of the beast. The shadow elf ran and jumped on its back, using the hardened hide as the perfect grip, points to scale up the neck. At the base of its skull, he drove his broken dagger into a small curve in the bone, spilling blood and severing part of the nervous system of the creature. He grasped the ash he had acquired and shoved it into the hole he had dug into the neck. As he did this, the other two heads of the creature bent backward, turning their attention to him. As more of the creature's blood poured over him, he managed to jump to another neck, grasping the horn of its head with one hand and stabbing repeatedly into its softer underside of its neck. He held his blade with his teeth and grabbed at the ash again, shoving as much as he could into the gaping neck before being slung from the neck itself. He struck the ground and rolled several times. His body ached all over, but he hastily pushed himself back up and saw the fruit of his work. The two massive heads began to burn with a white fire as the necks themselves became as layers of ash and fell apart. He lunged for his dagger that had landed a few feet away, just to feel and hear a massive dragon roar. The dragon bore down on him, its form broken from what it was before. It now only possessed a single head and a shattering body. Evurn thrust his staff into the creature's mouth just as it was about to cast fire upon him. He cast an entanglement spell, just happening to catch the creature before any fire had been produced. It chopped down on the vines of the spell, but it gave Evurn enough time to jump up and grasp the final neck. The shadow elf grabbed him by the throat, stabbing his dagger into its vessels. As it began to bleed a dark red, he took the entire bag of ash and shifted it into the laceration he'd made. The creature recoiled upward, throwing Evurn straight into the air, even as the creature burst into a shimmering white, glowing fire before turning into a pile of ash. A gust blew down upon the tundra, and in several waves of wind, the remains of the creature were blown away. Evurn braced for the impact he was expecting as he fell from above, but he suddenly was held in place. He looked down to see his fellow wizard reaching out and slowing his descent as he landed on the ground. Evurn watched as the fiery crevice that had opened up sealed and closed as the world around him faded to that of starlight. As both Evurn and Lorlaam floated through what only could be described as the night sky, they came to a single stone platform. They were both bleeding, beaten, and looked at each other, shaking their heads.
Good work, my elf friend.
"Shadow elf,"
Evurn specified.
Do not insult me by calling me simply elf.
Evurn stared at him, not blinking, and that seemed to worry the wizard. Evurn then smiled and laughed.
Thank you. It was a bit of fun, I'll admit.
As they stared at the nothingness before them, the greenish hue of the polar lights in the far north appeared before them.
You have both done well. I must now acquire new pets, but that is well with me. I much enjoy traversing the realms of the other gods. For you two, this is but one adventure of others yet to come.
Screw the gods, to the depths of Vanku there will be,
Evurn said.
This was a fun little jaunt, but I intend to return to where this wizard here found me, and live my life as simply as I can. I have had quite enough adventure.
So life for you is solitude. Do you not wish for anything else?
I came here to help him get his staff. That's it. I need nothing else.
The polar lights seemed to become still for a moment. Then the voice of the god spoke again.
So it will be. You will find solitude as you seek. But in truth, there will be more needed from you, Shadow Elf. More that is necessary before your end. You will have a hand in future events. There is a bond forged through these trials that will not simply fade away, my good friends. But it is best to move on to what was promised.
A simple wooden staff appeared before Lorlaam, and as he reached to take it, his hands trembled. He smiled as he grasped it. Runes covered the strange staff, and as he finally obtained what he had been searching for so long, he exhaled. Their surroundings immediately shifted from that of stars to blackness. Evurn could tell he was still standing, but he could also smell the scent of fresh snow and the saltiness of the glacial seas. They had returned to the island where Lorlaam had first approached Evurn. Evurn looked around, finding comfort in the dark waters crashing onto the rocky shore, and seeing the tavern he had been in when Lorlaam had found him. Lorlaam stared at his new staff and then nodded to Evurn.
Thank you, my friend.
Evurn returned the bow and then took a closer look at the staff itself. It did not look particularly powerful from what he could see.
Was his staff worth what we went through to get to it?
Lorlaam looked up at him and smiled.
It looks simple, but within this staff is a power not common in our world as it is now. The Dwemhar have all but faded, but this gives me hope. It gives me the chance to save the only one I love in this world. But of that, I know you have no interest right now.
He smiled and patted him on the shoulder.
Thank you, truly, thank you.
Evurn smiled at his new friend as the man turned away and began toward the docks at a slow walk. It had been a strange adventure, but an adventure still. Lorlaam stepped onto a small boat, similar to the one he had when they'd first gone on their journey. In a few moments, the wizard faded from view as a deep fog rolled over the island. Evurn went back to the tavern and sat back down at the same table he had been at before. As a woman brought him an ale, he couldn't be helped to notice the woman looked almost as if the woman from before had followed him. But he knew it not to be her. As he sipped his ale, he looked around at the other souls within the bar and realized that at this very moment, perhaps it wasn't solitude in an icy tavern that he really wanted. As he chugged his drink, he looked toward the door and wondered if he was too late to go on another adventure with his newfound wizard friend. The end. For now.
I hope you enjoyed this short tale featuring Evurn and Lorlaam. There is more to their story within the Stormborn Saga books. If you're willing, I would appreciate you leaving a review of this story. Also, please join my Patreon linked below and unlock exclusive reader benefits. Thank you for listening.
In early 2017, the actual assortment of monsters of Wizard Trials were inspired in part by the readers listed here. These readers helped shape this story after I put out a call for monster ideas for Evurn and Lorlaam to face in a series of trials. Amel, a giant centipede creature found in Lone Wizard. Brandy D, the rock found in a desert tower. Josh B. Vrekleon, creatures found in a desert tower. Tommy C., the oracle-like assembly found in a shadow elf's solitude. Scott W., the shape-shifting siren/narwhal of Frigid Sea. Laurel T. Water, sprites found in Frigid Sea. Karen B. and Angie F. unicorn monsters, found in Starry Paths. Jana K., the dragon-like creature inspired by the Zmei Gorinik, found in Starry Paths. Thank you for adding to the world of the Dwemha realms and for being dedicated readers of my work.